Had he said, you'll start on Saturday in the first league game, I would have turned the job down.
Really?
I believe still. There wouldn't have been a television career.
Just give us an idea of some of the memories that you have.
To go to a World Cup as a commentator.
You get in a bit of trouble in Argentina.
We were all instructed not to go.
And of course, the many World Cups you're at, you were there for the Maradona England moment.
I saw Peter Shilton chase the referee. That was the trigger point for me to realise there was something wrong.
Unbelievable.
One thing that you fear as a commentator is not knowing the players.
You overthink your commentary lines on the way home.
Why did I say that?
We have to talk about this moment, Martin. That Agüero moment.
Has anybody thought that was going to happen
very
the other
good
day? I told Sergio, very humbling moment, to be honest with you.
I bet it was.
I will remember all the time.
And it's live.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Inside the Industry Unfiltered with myself, Adam Smith. Delighted to say on the podcast this week, a true legend. Now, I'm not usually a fan of the word legend, but when it comes to people within the industry, this man is absolutely a legend. The voice of football for decades, someone that's been very good to me over the years as well. It is the one and only Martin Tyler. Martin, firstly, thank you so much for giving up your time for coming in today.
Adam, it's a pleasure. Legend means old, and I do qualify in that respect. And yeah, it's great. I've just entered the world of podcasting myself, so it's interesting to see how it's done by the true professionals. I shall take away a lot of information from you today and hopefully transfer it to the joy of football, which we're, I think episode 9 is the next one we're shooting. So it's out there. But you're well established, so I'm pleased to be a part of your show.
It's a great podcast, actually. It's available on YouTube as well as all the audio platforms, isn't it? So I thoroughly recommend you check it out. Martin, there's so much to talk about with you because obviously you've covered so much football for so many years. So I think the obvious first question is, how did your career in commentary begin? Because am I right in thinking you were quite a good footballer as a young man?
Well, I played in the non-league. There was no national league in those days, no conference. So the Isthmian League was probably the top league in the southeast of England outside the Football League, but it was full of good players. I was not one of them.
Oh, really?
I was okay, but it was I played up front, and you can always judge the level more than any other position, I think, because do the goals start to dry up the higher you go? And
Is that what happened?
We often say that in commentary, don't we, about will he be able to play in the next level?
Yeah.
And that level was tough for me and I wasn't in a very successful side, but played against some very good players and ended up commentating on one or two of them that I'd played against. Literally, John Lacey, who played for Spurs, he marked me a couple of times in games. And I think he didn't play very well in the game I saw. I think I was still in his pocket because I had been in those two games. But it was a wonderful experience. I was coached by some very good people, including George Cohen, who won the World Cup. Cool. Sadly, passed quite recently. He was a fantastic guy and a great coach. He said two things I'll never forget. Love the ball and make sure your girlfriend comes to watch because you'll always play better.
Really?
Hardly tactical.
I was going to say, is that true with you? Is that true?
Yeah, I think it probably was. Yeah, family generally, and I think a lot of proper footballers they love having their families there, don't they? And I think the problem is if they have 2 or 3 different girlfriends who come to the same game, that might be a bit more difficult.
We'll move on from that. I do know what you mean, actually, because I played I use the term lightly, but a few sort of charity celebrity matches. And if my wife does come to watch me, I do give an extra 5%. I mean, the distance covered is not great because my fitness is gone, but it's an interesting point that you make.
That was from a World Cup winner, so I pass it on.
It's great advice. So how did your break come in the media industry then? Because I'm intrigued to know, everyone I speak to when we do this pod, their sort of journey is very different and individual to that person. So how did your sort of first break, I suppose, come within the media industry?
Well, I'd done a little bit of coverage of football when I was at university because I was at East Anglia in Norwich, and I was in the football team and the cricket team, and nobody seemed to want to bother to put the reports. We had a university newspaper, which I don't know everybody read, but we wanted to be in it, and I was the one who volunteered to write the reports. So I think selfishly, I wanted to make sure that if I had scored a couple of goals, they got mentioned properly. The description was as vivid as an untrained journalist could do. So I had a little bit of background in it, but then left university. I had a job in market research, which, I didn't really enjoy, but it sort of got me into the into being able to get a flat in London and things like that.
Yeah.
Rent a flat, I mean, with mates as almost like a sort of sitcom cliche in the 60s. And then my girlfriend at the time knew somebody who worked for a publisher, just a sort of school friend, really, and they sort of grown up together. And she came around one day and said, Malcolm, his name is Malcolm White, a very important figure in my life. He's an art editor at a publisher called Marshall Cavendish, and they're going to start a football magazine. It was a part work, really, to be technically correct. It meant you collect it in weekly parts, and you get the binders, you know. It became an encyclopedia of football. And I said, well, why don't you try and, didn't like market research, why don't you try for it? So I rang up, I got given the phone number sort of privately, I rang up the person that mattered, and he said, this is a top secret. How do you know about it? I was on the back foot straight away. And I said, well, with the greatest respect, a journalist never reveals his sources, which was 100% what I knew about journalism in one sentence. That's all I knew about it, really. Anyway, I got an interview, and he gave me a trial, and I started. Actually, I started on the day Arsenal won the league, on the Monday in 1971, and on the following Saturday, they won the cup and did the double.
Right.
So it was quite a prestigious week to start on. And a lot of the people, on my first day at work, this is absolutely true, they left to go to White Hart Lane to watch the game.
Wow.
And the best thing about it, from my point of view, is a Monday to Friday job. Right. So I could still play. Yeah. And we trained 2 nights a week, so Saturdays was fine. So it was a sort of nice, gentle introduction. The problem came when the part work came to an end. It was 75 weekly parts. And they said, you can stay on. Your writing's not bad. You can stay on, but we're going to put you on Golden Hands. And I said, what's that about? Knitting and sewing. And I went, pardon? And they said, oh, look, this is the part work philosophy. You'll move around, and if you want to stay with us, you'll be all sorts of subjects. I said, don't think so, somehow. Yeah. Anyway, in the course of those 18 months or so I worked there, I'd met people at ITV. Because I was put on the tactics strand, and we would go, obviously there were no video recorders in those days, so there would be a tactic like free kicks over the wall or something like that. And the idea was to find somebody who did it and talk to the player, but we needed to illustrate it with arrows and, a diagram, really. And the only way you could do that was to see it over and over again. Well, there was no way of seeing it over and over again except going to the television studio. So somehow they did a deal with London Weekend Television, which meant once every 6 weeks we stockpiled the subject. I went in and sat by this big video machine, 2-inch videotape, and they got these huge containers of tapes and all stuff. And this all for me. Yeah. You got half an hour, and the artist came in and we drew the film. So I've met a few people there. Yeah. Out of the blue, in the summer of 73, I think it was, I got a phone call saying, we're one short on our production team. Would you like to come and work? I was an avid watcher of the Big Match and On the Ball and all the ITV football programs. And, but they said Saturdays. So I had to make a decision. I said, no.
You said no straight away?
Oh, yeah. I said, no, it's a nice idea, but I play. Yeah. And anyway, in the meantime, I've been fixed up by somebody else to write for the late, great Jimmy Hill, who was the face and the first analyst, really, and also presenter on ITV. And he just joined the BBC. And so I used to just, I couldn't type. I'm not that journalistically skilled. I couldn't do shorthand or anything. So I wrote it. Jimmy would ring me on the Tuesday, so I want to do something on Brian Clough. You've got to go and get some quotes from Brian Clough and then send me something by Friday. So in those days, you could ring the training grounds, and if you were lucky, you got through. Bertie Mee, who was the Arsenal manager, he wasn't impressed at all when I rang up. Right. He gave me a flea in my ear, and I had to really convince him that I was doing this for Jimmy Hill. Yeah. Anyway, so I would drop the copy. Jimmy lived in West London. I'd drop the copy and literally drive to West London, put the envelope through his door, and go home again. and play on the Saturday. Anyway, one time Jimmy was there. He said, "I'll come and have a coffee." So I told him the story, and I said, "I've turned it down." I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "You're mad. You're turning down the chance to go into television." I said, "How good a player are you?" And look, he had a bit of a connection with Corinthian Casuals, so where I was playing.
Yeah.
So I think he knew, really. Anyway, I said, "Well, I'm in and out of the first team, and it was a tough gig, but it's a good league." Anyway, so on that day, he said, "Go home and tell them you'll do it. You never know where it'll lead to."
Wow.
And I did, half hoping, Adam, to be honest with you, that they would say the job was filled.
Really?
But they said, "Yeah, okay, come in for a chat. Yeah, be all right." So then I had to go to my manager, who was quite a famous person in sport, Mickey Stewart, who was an ex-footballer, but also a test cricketer and a coach of England's test team. Father of Alex Stewart.
Alex Stewart? Yeah, I was going to say, yeah.
So Alec was born around the time I was playing, and I've known him. I saw him the other day, and I've known him all his life. And so I had to go, and we were training at the Oval because Mickey, the cricket connection, and it was sort of early August, pre-season about to start, and I went up to him and said, "Look, I'm sorry, I might not be able to play. I've got a chance to go into television." Had he said, "Hang on a minute, you've done a good pre-season, you'll start on Saturday in the first league game," I would have turned the job down, really? I believe still. What he actually said was, "Good luck, son."
You're on the bench, you can go.
Yeah.
Wow, so had he said that I want you to play, you may never have pursued a career in television?
It's easy. It's a nice way to tell the story now. I don't know, Adam, to be honest with you. I think I'd probably committed myself. But if he'd really tried, I might have had second thoughts. And we laugh about it now. He's 90, coming up 92, I think. And he's just as bright as he was then. And he's a fantastic person. So he did me a good turn.
Yeah, amazing really story that. So obviously Jimmy Hill, hugely influential in your career. So the first game you commentated on then, can you remind me?
Well, I went into television not as a commentator. That was the first thing.
Yeah.
I went in as an editorial assistant. And if you see on the Big Match Revisited, my credit is up there with the likes of Jeff Fulser and Mike Murphy and people like that. Jeff Fulser's still in the business, actually. He's head of Sunset and Vine. Had a fantastic career. So I edited the goals together for On the Ball. I edited the Big Match, which was a real skill. It was I was taught these skills. I didn't know. I think the goals, if you've been involved in football as a little bit of a player, you know when the move starts and what you should keep in and what you shouldn't. So that was quite natural. But the match was a creative process to make it look in 20 minutes like it was the whole match. And it obviously still exists in Match of the Day now. That's the skill of those who, not the ones who actually make the technical decisions, but say, we come in here and come in there, and that's got to stay in because that's the key moment in the game, you know? Or maybe lifting a line of commentary. Even then we did it.
Yes, edit producers and telling the story,
to tell the story, So that was what I did for a season, the 73, 74 season. But I was getting a bit frustrated for not being at football grounds, which I've been since I was 8 years old and first went to watch Woking. Saturdays was watching football, and playing football. Anyway, when you're on the inside, as you probably have experienced yourself, that you do sense an opportunity. And we had a system where we worked, there were 3 of us for 2 jobs because the jobs were very hard. So every third weekend you got off. So you'd be working full on first thing Saturday morning, editing right up till 1 or 2 in the morning, go in the next morning, record the Big Match. It was recorded in the morning and finally flop at about 2 o'clock in the afternoon. So we had this weekend off, and I look back and I think, actually, I probably could have played,
Really?
But I didn't think about that. Anyway, so I asked if I could go to a game, and I took a tiny little portable, it was a cassette recorder, just the ordinary mic, not as sophisticated as this, and I did a game.
So just to clarify, you weren't asked to commentate on that. That's something proactively you did.
Yeah. I wanted to do something. I'd listen. I watched football on the television. I was absolutely obsessed with football from a very early age. So I watched and listened, obviously not knowing any thought that it would be me, but I listened to what the commentators said. It was mostly Kenneth Wolstenholme and the early ITV commentators as well. So I sort of had some idea, and now my job was to edit commentators and things. So it wasn't me being smart, thinking, "Oh, I can do better than you." I just thought I'd quite like to have a go. You know?
Yeah.
But there were only maybe 3 jobs at the BBC and 6 or 7 jobs at ITV regional comment. That's all it was. Now, you know, you can start. You can go to, you know, to a Webs Club website or go to a media course and learn it as a career pathway.
Yeah.
It was hit and miss. You were very lucky to get in, and I was extremely lucky. So I did this game and played it to somebody, a guy called Bob Gardam, who directed ITV's football and was, in his own way, a genius. And he said, "Oh, yeah, it's not bad. Why don't you have another go next time you got a weekend off?" So a few weeks later, as luck would have it, I suppose, we're in an open plan office. So, but he's a bit further away, sort of back behind that curtain, but open plan. And then the phone rings and he answers the phone and then he turns away and I'm sort of looking at him answering the phone, nosy. And he then turns away and starts like this. And I think I knew at that moment he was talking about something that concerned me.
Really?
And Southern Television was now Meridian. They rang up saying, we need a commentator for one game.
Wow.
And he said, I think I might have somebody you could use for one game. And the upshot was they listened to him because he was obviously top of the tree in what he did. And then I was asked to do a proper game, not again, but not into my little cassette recorder. It was recorded on a proper tape at West Ham.
Wow.
And they listened to it and they said, all right, we'll take him for a game.
Wow.
And that's how it happened.
Because someone dropped out and they needed you for
it was
one
Jerry
game.
Williams, who was a very famous tennis commentator who did a bit of football on the side. But then Southern only did 6 games a season. So
it's a huge opportunity then for them to...
It was an amazing opportunity.
Yeah.
And it was Christmas. Things happened to me over Christmas. Weird. I made my debut in senior football on Boxing Day, 11 o'clock kickoff. And no Christmas, no food.
Yeah.
I was trying to eat the right kind of food.
Yeah, of course.
Hydrating and not celebrating. And that was 68, and this is 74. It's December the 28th. And I went to see Southampton against Sheffield Wednesday.
I thought you were going to say Santa there, so I went to see Santa.
I should have gone. And on the Boxing Day, Southampton played at Portsmouth, and I thought, I've got to go and try and see that, which was difficult, but it was a massive derby. But I managed to get in and see that game. And then they were playing Sheffield Wednesday, who travelled down on the Friday, and before the 28th. So that 26th was scouting a game. 27th was travelling to Southampton, and I met the Sheffield Wednesday group. I found out where they were staying.
Yeah.
I'd not seen them play. And I said, can I meet them at dinner or something? And the guy, he's not really known as a manager. He was a very well-known coach at Arsenal called Steve Burtonshaw. He was manager of Sheffield Wednesday for a brief time. When I tell you this story, you'll understand why it was a brief time. But he was really kind to me. He said, look, you can see them at dinner, but I can do better than that. We're training in the morning.
Wow. On
the morning of the match.
Wow.
3 o'clock kickoff at the Dell.
Yeah.
So we're going to go and do a little bit, get the hotel out of our legs. I said, can I come? He said, of course you can come. Yeah, no problem.
Brilliant.
But in those days, there were only like 12 or 13 players to learn about. And obviously I knew about them, but I hadn't seen them.
Extra prep for the big moment.
Identification is the most important part of the job. So he was great. And I did that. And Eric Potts, the little ginger-haired winger, scored after 2 minutes, only goal of the game for Sheffield Wednesday. And Sheffield Wednesday won 1-0, which is not ideal for a commentator. The home team are getting a bit of stick. Mick Shannon was the star, didn't play. He was injured. And they didn't really... But this was the Southampton team that was getting ready to be the team that won the FA Cup in 76.
Yeah,
so it was only 18 months before that.
Yeah.
And so I did the game and I had to do the whole program. I had to do the links and like the second game, whichever it was, a commentator so-and-so there. We used to have to say what the colours were, or if you're watching in black and white.
Of course.
I learned all this stuff I learned this stuff from being on part of the big match, but I'd never said it before. Yeah. So I had to do the whole program and the links, and that that was my debut. And there's an old saying at Sky: "You've done 2 games today, your first and your last," and that crossed my mind. But there were a lot of occasional people doing it, including the match director, who was far more famous for doing light entertainment.
Yeah.
And his name was Stephen Wade, and he did look after me very well on the day. But he did what was a really big show in the late 50s, early 60s on ITV called Sunday Night at the London Palladium.
Right.
That was like 20 million prime time.
Wow.
And here he was tucked away in the local football match with a novice commentating.
Yeah, incredible.
And anyway, it ended up with, he said to me afterwards, "Old boy." He said, "Old boy." Not that I was an old boy then. "Old boy, I've got another game in a couple of weeks. Would you like to do that?"
Wow.
And that's the nicest thing anybody's ever said to me in my television career, because there wouldn't have been a television career if that hadn't been said.
Wow, that's powerful. It's amazing listening to your story there, because I can relate to a lot, and I'm not comparing my career to yours in any way. I'm you're leagues away
You've
from...
got years.
Well, hopefully. Yeah. But my big break as a presenter actually came when Max Rushton had food poisoning. I was working on Soccer M at the time, and I'd done sort of player interviews and little snippets within the show. But he was ill on the Friday with food poisoning, and my boss on the morning of Soccer M, huge show at the time, asked me to co-host it with Helen Chamberlain, who is a genius of a presenter. But I got that big break in TV because someone else, it was a last minute. I think they'd probably tried everyone else. They couldn't find anyone. Did okay, clearly. And obviously I'm now a presenter with Sky. And it's interesting that your story, your big break came from having that opportunity. And it's great advice to people that, you know, you threw yourself in at the deep end as I did, and it proved to pave the way. And you went on from that to commentate in the 70s and 80s, covering World Cups and Euros. Now, we can't go through every World Cup you're involved in, but just give us an idea of some of the memories that you have in the 70s and 80s covering some of those tournaments, because there were some huge moments you covered.
Yes, I mean, 78 was, England weren't in it, and I was the junior, so that was... But that to go to a World Cup as a commentator, especially to South America. I've never been back to Argentina since.
Really?
Much as I would love to. I'm trying to find somebody who'll make a program of me going back to Argentina to look, because it was very politically difficult. I was a member of the NUJ then, the National Union of Journalists, and we were all instructed not to go.
There's a story of you. Did you get in a bit of trouble in Argentina? Right?
Well, not to do with the journalism or to do with the politics, to do with another person who I sort of great respect for, who passed away recently, Menotti, the coach of Argentina, when they won the World Cup. He tried to get me quite rightly thrown out of the camp. Wow. watching Argentina train.
So to clarify, you were working. You went to do extra prep by watching them train when you weren't supposed to.
It was like one of your stories, Adam. Yeah. It's just these things happen. I don't know, by destiny or whatever. Yeah. But I was given none of the major games. I was the fourth choice commentator and very much the kid, you know. So I didn't expect to do too much. But I was given 9 games. They were all highlight games. But they changed after the first group stage. There was a second group stage in those days. And we were all moved around. And there were 4 venues, I think, Buenos Aires being the capital one. And I found myself in Rosario, and the weather changed. And John Bromley, the head of the whole delegation, head of ITV Sport, he sent out a message to all the 4 commentators saying, stay where you are, because the planes, this is the Winter World Cup. So the planes weren't traveling and there was no public transport. And suddenly, at 36 hours notice, I was to do Argentina against Brazil.
Wow.
Yeah. And I hadn't seen, I mean, I was nowhere near that sort of caliber of match, really. Anyway, so I went to obviously, it was the base for Argentina, Rosario, and I said, can I come and watch them train? One day to go, day before the game, match day -1. And they said, no. And I went, but look, this is the biggest challenge. Honestly, I put on the biggest sob stuff and everything. No. So I found out where it was. And it was from outside. It was down in a bit of a bowl in a training centre. You could go up on the bank behind the fence and watch, which I did. And I got spotted by Menotti, who stopped the training session.
The entire training session? Yeah. Because of you?
He stopped the training session and said to the heavies, go up and get rid of him, basically. I know it's and my version of it is interesting, but I got another version of it 40 years later from the star of that World Cup, Mario Kempes.
Yeah.
Who remembered, I met him in the World Cup in Russia. He actually did when I was doing the FIFA computer game in English, he was doing the Latin American one. Okay. He was the Alan Smith or Andy Gray or whatever. So, and I met the guy who was doing my job in Russia, and he said, I'm here with Mario Kempes. I went, he's the hero of my first World Cup. He said, so we'll fix a coffee. And in the course of the conversation, he tells me, I tell this story about how, he said, I remember it. I remember we're all looking up at what's going to happen. This major international incident's going to happen. But I stuck to my guns and kept looking, but I couldn't find anybody to point them out to me. There were people there, but they wouldn't come near the fence because they knew what was going to happen to me.
Yeah.
Anyway, so the guys came up and I went, politically, this is the only thing that happened. I went, okay. I said, no camera, no intervista. I don't even know if that's the right word. Commentarista, a solo commentarista. And they were still getting the batons out. And I went, okay, I go Inglaterra, Argentina, no amigos. And that was, I don't know whether that was politically strong. They wanted to be, they were under orders to be friendly to the World Cup, not tiny commentators like me, but basically to the whole media.
Media, yeah.
And they went on the one, and they let me stay.
Wow.
And not only that, they let all the 200 or so fans up against the fence as well.
Wow.
And they pointed out all the players to me. The game finished 0-0. There's no story about it. I wish I could say because of that this happened, but I love when Mario Kempes, maybe he was being nice to me or anything like that, but he genuinely seemed to, and he told me wonderful stories about that World Cup and how he left, went home to visit his mum on the night final. It was in Buenos Aires. His mum's in Rosario, I think. So he just bunked off.
Wow.
Banged on the door. She thought it was somebody coming to rob the house, and it was Mario with his World Cup winners.
Wow.
So that's part of the joy. If you're lucky enough to still be around, which you will be, when you're looking back on the times like your times now, and you can find somebody to reminisce. It's the only decent part about getting old, to be honest with you.
Powerful. I think what I'll take from that is your attention to detail and the prep that you were risking effectively getting arrested and police chasing with batons to still do your prep for one of the biggest commentary moments of your career at the time. I think that's very powerful.
The one thing that you fear as a commentator is not knowing the players. And now it's easy because everybody's on YouTube or on, you can record any game from anywhere, and it's not an issue. But then I'd watch the games, but even watching the games, watching it on Argentina television, the grainy pictures, you couldn't be sure.
You couldn't really tell.
And like Mario, there was Luque and a few others, all had the long hair.
Yeah.
And so I just wanted to do the best I could do at the job. I wasn't trying to be anything other than professional, really. But I loved the game, and it was a chance to see obviously Ardiles and people like that, Yeah. So it wasn't a pivotal moment, but it's a good story and it's true.
Yeah, and of course the many World Cups you're at, you were there for the Maradona England moment. Now, when you saw that happen, could you clock that it was a handball or something untoward was going on, or were you oblivious to it like the referee was?
No, something untoward is the answer, not the handball. I'd be lying to say I saw a handball.
Yeah, okay.
But I saw Peter Shilton chase the referee. Okay. And I'd commentated on Peter Shilton and seen him play for a number of years, and I knew he didn't do that.
So that was out of character for him?
Totally out of character. That was the trigger point for me to realise there was something wrong.
Right.
I was commentating with David Pleat, who was also on it very quickly. And so we worked from there. The replays came up, so we realised what it was about. And then the second goal happened, and you sort of went, well, it's a crass line, really, but I've said it a few times, is that the second goal was worth 2.
Right, cancels out the handball,
And I just think, I did think that we'd equalised to go 2-2. I must say that was probably the moment where I as an Englishman, I've always tried to be impartial in internationals and generally impartial. The two teams on the pitch. Last game I commentated on was Liverpool's Klopp farewell game. Yeah. And I spoke to people at Wolves. I said, look, everyone's talking about Klopp and Liverpool. It'll all be about them, but there's 90 minutes of football here. I want to be fair to you guys. And And so talking to them, and that to me is the joy of the job, Adam, is preparing both teams, and then every game you do, what's going to work, what's not going to work, and who's going to. And there's so many variables, marginals. Ball hits a divot and hits the post and stays out. Another day it might go in, and how it all pans out, and sort of watching it all unfold with the privilege of preparation, really.
Yeah.
And it doesn't spoil it. I know fans like to go and I'm a fan. I go and watch Woking, and I perhaps don't. I was coached there for 4 years, but now when I go and watch them, I just go as a fan, and it's just let's see what's going to happen. I don't really want to know too much about how. I just want to watch a game of football,
Yeah.
But as a commentator, it is that moment from the start of prep to the final whistle of the game. Then that's a real it still tickles me all these times to do it, because that's why I'm still doing it, because it's addictive, if you like, but that's not a very pleasant word, I don't think. But it's just Mick Shannon, who I mentioned earlier, used to say it's a feeling you can't scratch.
Really?
Yeah. And that's there, and I hope it never goes away.
It's brilliantly brings me next onto this section that I wanted to talk to you about in depth, actually, because you said there you are effectively providing the soundtrack to our sporting lives, ultimately people's memories. So I'd quite like to talk to you about what it takes to be a commentator and the prep that goes into it. So for, say, a Super Sunday match of Liverpool v Man United, when does the prep start, and what does that prep involve from start to pre-game, so to speak?
Well, working backwards, I think you probably have to, because you might not have that much time. If you have a week, it does start the moment the week starts. If you've got a day in the World Cup, it starts the finish of the day before. But I call it the smell of the fixture.
Okay.
And if you get to sitting down on the gantry when the team's doing the warm up, and or you believe what it means to everybody, what it might mean on the Monday is not the same what it might mean on a Sunday afternoon,
Yeah.
So what on the day, what's come about, or somebody playing who we didn't think was going to play, somebody had the Harry Kane breaking records game after game after game. We've got to be across. How important is that today? Maybe there's something more important than that. Maybe if he gets a landmark today, it's a minor landmark. If he breaks the Spurs goal scoring record, you've got, those
so
sort of things.
Is it about prioritising what you envisage the story will be?
Journalistically prioritising. I mean, a football, it's very complicated, really, as an exercise. To answer your question about what does it take, it takes what you bring to your work, and different commentators do it in different ways.
Heard that.
So it's not for me to say how other broadcasters can do it. I can tell you how I do it, and it stems from wanting to be there, really wanting the love of the game and the privilege of having the job, And
in terms of practically then, if you start on the Monday to the Sunday, what are you doing there? Are you reading newspapers, watching YouTube clips? Are you writing things down on a bit of paper on an iPad? What practically does Martin Tyler do?
I went through a phase of putting it on computers and stuff, but I just handwritten because it's quicker.
Okay.
And therefore my notes will never fetch anything on some sort of artistic merit.
Yeah, I've seen that.
The only notes that I've given to anybody was to Sergio Agüero.
Yeah, saw that.
When I got very short, very lucky. My office is full of bits of handwritten notes. There are in certain piles. My Man City pile's like that big, and I opened it, and I thought I'm going to see Sergio tomorrow. I've got to do something, and. It opened at the page.
Did it?
2012,
Wow.
Yeah. It was all meant to be. And then I had to find somebody to put them in a frame at very short notice.
Yeah, I remember this.
So I was rushing up and down the A3 to various places, and then it was still the pandemic, and would I pass the test to get in and everything. So, but the notes are basically about the players. So you've got two teams.
Yeah, a page on each. You do one A4 page on each.
2 pages on each. 1 page on the players, and the other page on the club.
Yeah,
and the same for both.
So you have 4 pages of A4 piece of paper in front of you for each game.
Yeah, that's the way I do it, and I don't look at them at all.
Do you not?
No.
So do you have to learn that then? Do you have to learn all 4 pages prior
no,
to
you don't learn it, but you try and think. I mean, you're thinking all week about, oh gosh, the most important thing is I'm trying to, who's going to score the last Klopp goal? You're thinking about that, and it was the most amazing. It was from an inch, and it was the record-breaking goal for the Premier League, for the top division. Sorry, for the Premier League, the record number of goals. It broke the all-time record, and it was scored by Gerald Quansah, who looked so embarrassed because they thought he'd stolen it from Mo Salah.
So in that moment then, had you been preparing for Mo Salah to score the final goal under the Klopp era?
No, I was definitely prepared for that at the Kop end in the second half.
Right.
But it never happened.
Yeah.
So you can't,
because you could never think that, could you? You never think that Quansah would score Klopp's last goal, for instance.
And he'd scored in the game before, which I did as well, Villa.
Yeah.
So he scored 2 goals in Klopp's last 2 games, and the big quiz questions that come from that, weren't there?
Yeah.
As well.
Definitely.
And we had to really be sure that he touched it at all, that it wasn't an own goal, so it was a forensic check on it with Jim Begley and I was doing it with. But things in your mind, you've just got to hope that your instincts take you in the right direction. Of course, they don't always do that. And one of the hard parts of the job, maybe the only hard part of the job really, is to deal with the constant trips home where you go, why did I say that?
Do you?
Why didn't I say that?
You overthink your commentary lines on the way home, the drive home?
I have to. It's a process that you can't stop yourself going through it.
Really?
But then it's done.
Is it almost like a footballer? You think of, a lot of footballers say they think of the missed chances more than the goals they score because they know they can score them in their head. Do you think back to the lines you shouldn't say rather than actually how much success you've had? Is that a natural human emotion?
I just think there are little bits that you wouldn't even understand. Not being disparaging about that. Little nuances that you think, could I have done that, or should I have, given that a bit more oomph? And it's just impossible to do a perfect commentary.
Yeah.
So, but you try. And you give it your best shot every time, and it's only. I mean, I came away from. I mean, we did another hour broadcasting on Klopp's departure. I'm more concerned about whether I got the names of the coaches all right,
really?
And they're all going up. And but listen, you have to have that wish for perfection in you, I think. But the most important thing, and this I hope goes through all commentators, you have to love the game. I do talks for students, and they say, "What would you recommend?" I said, "Do you want to give up every weekend?"
I agree with that. You've got to have a real passion for this. Yeah.
Does it football mean that much to you? Have a lovely life around it, but I always used to say this to my family: I can't move the fixtures. We've got to move our lives around when the fixtures are. And if we're going to carry on like this, and that's the way we worked our way through it. And I think that for the younger generation today, who perhaps feel that there is that we haven't left them the legacy of a good balance,
work-life balance.
Yeah. And I've had young people at Sky say to me, well, I don't want to do it that way.
I know what you mean.
We used to say at Sky at the South season, right, we rehearse for the first show, and then we keep going, and then we finish, and then we get 2 months off. And if anybody even thought about taking a holiday in November or January, it would be, what do you mean? We don't do this. But of course that's changing, and I think it's probably right that it is changing. Yeah. But that commitment, I think you will only get to my age doing it if you've got that commitment. I'm not saying I'm right.
No, it's interesting.
I'm really not saying that at all.
No, a lot of people we had on this podcast who've achieved a certain level all have that incredible drive and passion for what they're doing, and have actually given up a lot along the way to get there. So you're resonating with a lot of what our other guests have said, which is
gain
really
a lot along the way.
You do gain a lot, of course.
So
I'm interested in what you said there about the prep that goes into it. You've had some incredibly iconic lines. We're going to come on to talk about some of your famous commentary lines, and we're going to talk about the Agüero moment in depth, because you've got some amazing stories about the Agüero moment that I want to share with our viewers and listeners. But how much of what we hear from your commentary is scripted, is planned, and how much is just off the cuff in the moment, would you say?
What you hear that is scripted is, right, in goal today it is Alisson.
Right.
In the back four is the same. It played at Villa the other night.
Yeah.
So-and-so's come into midfield, and the subs are to fit the Sky graphics or the Premier League production graphics under. That's the scripted bit.
Really? So the whole 90 minutes is reactive in the moment.
Yeah,
the Vardy, the Tony Adams, the Agüero moments.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean...
Is that the same for all commentators, would you say?
No, and I'm telling you about now. I can't remember the years gone by that I might have done at the beginning. It's a comfort blanket to start with. The one thing that I do write down and still write down, well, I don't know, but I certainly did until Croatian, is if they win, what does that mean?
Right.
If they lose, what does that mean? If it's a draw, what's that mean? So you might be saying, if you're doing a Sunday game, it's the only game of the day or the last game of the weekend, that means they've gone up a place in the table and gone down, which you might, it's more reflecting of the facts rather than what's happened. But no, I mean, it's just reflecting the moment, And I wouldn't want to be hamstrung by thinking I should say this on a goal.
Okay.
And there are things that 11 rhymes with heaven, doesn't it? I mean, I talk in that sort of rubbish language. I love a pun or a rhyme or anything. I mean, alliteration. Everybody, if you listen to my work, you can do that, and it's not poetry.
So that's a famous. It's 11 for Jamie Vardy. I think it's heaven for Jamie Vardy. I think he said hold the front pages, hold the back pages. That sounded incredibly poetic, but that was all off the cuff. That moment, was it? Wow. Yeah.
I mean, I'm not saying that I'm. What do you do? Put it on the T-shirt or something, So I was here, I saw it. Those kind of things that there is a finite number of things that you can say.
Cliches,
and that's what you try to avoid, a cliche. But I mean, there are certain phrases that I would never use, like breaking the deadlock. I had a thing about that. I never.
Why was that? Just out of interest?
I didn't like it.
Okay.
And I would never say, well, that's the goal that breaks the deadlock. I mean, it became a bit of a cliche during a certain part, I think, of commentary generally. So there's certain things.
Your attention to detail. And I've seen your notes. I've sat on a gantry with you, actually. I don't know if you remember this, the last game at White Hart Lane. We were doing a Facebook Live for Sky Sports. And I was privileged as a Tottenham fan. Privileged as a Tottenham fan, to be there, and thankfully we won. But seeing your notes and your preparation and your attention to detail is second to none, isn't it? That's fair to say.
Well, there's a day where Tottenham decided that they were going to do it themselves, and that was their right, And then on the morning of the game, or maybe the afternoon before the game, I got told I was doing it, and there were 48 players coming on.
The legends,
Yeah, so I had to, listen, I couldn't have manufactured that without writing that down, But fortunately, you've got some stories that people you knew, like Glenn Hoddle and people like that, So it was, and going way back. I mean, people at Tottenham, you know about this, but Tottenham doing the double, I was alive. I wasn't a broadcaster or anything, but I was a football nut. And that Tottenham double team, it stays with you forever because it's the greatest team of its generation. And now, we're talking about Man City doing the double as if it's not good enough, like the treble.
Incredible.
Doing the double was a thing. It'd never been done since the 1890s or something like that. And then Spurs did it, and then of course Arsenal had to go and do it. 10 years later. Yeah. So those things, and like Clive Allen's dad, Les played, and so there's usually something you can refer back to that's been part of your obsession with football, really. And I suppose that's the advantage. I can't mend the fuse or change. I just about change a light bulb. But
Same, yeah.
Because my dad was an ironmonger, you know, and he had all the skills. People come into our shop. We lived over the shop in West Byfleet, and he'd come and say, "Can you fix this?" And if I would help out in the holidays, so when I was a student, I might get a few bob from doing it, and I'd have to go, "You'll have to see my dad."
Really?
I can sell you that kettle over there.
Yeah, and commentate
it's got
over
a price on it.
Give you the soundtrack to the kettle.
But, letting off steam, yeah. But so in what it gives me and what we're talking about, there's a lot that isn't there in my brain, you know.
We mentioned their match day, and I mentioned the last game at Tottenham. I'm intrigued to know your match day routine, because every time I've been covering a game at Tottenham or Wembley, you're always there. You're always one of the first people at the stadium. So what is your match day routine? And is part of it getting there very early?
Yes, and we're speaking before the cup final. That's always a tricky trip from where I live in Surrey to Wembley, you know. So what time? Often my partner says to me, "What time are you leaving?" And I go, "Yeah, I better think about that." But I have to think about it, not just do it. I'll be leaving at 10 o'clock or something like that. You never. I mean, the one thing I don't think they can forgive you for is not turning up.
No,
you know. I had one at West Ham when there was a hurricane, and I live near Junction. I still live in the same house now, near Junction 9.
Yeah. And
I was going around over the bridge and then back into West Ham. You know? Yeah. Or through the tunnel and then back into West Ham.
Yeah.
And I went from 9, I couldn't get to 8. You know?
Really?
Yeah. And my colleagues at Sky were loving this and sending me messages. And
really?
And a police car went past very slowly, and I ran the window down and I went, "Sorry, can you help me? Because I'm commentating on West Ham v Everton, it was. Can you help me get out of this?" And the policeman said, "They'll have to get somebody else, won't they?"
Really?
Yeah. So that wasn't very helpful. But
so what happened? Did you get there in time?
Well, I shouldn't be saying how I did it, really.
Right, okay, fine. But you did. But that must be...
But no, I didn't get there in time. Well, I got there what you would say in time. Maybe you wouldn't say, but most people would say in time.
So you didn't miss kickoff, but it was later than you were...
I was there by 4 o'clock kickoff in those days, I think. I was there by 2:10. It was far too late for me.
Was it? So what's your usual routine then?
I never got the game. I never felt that I got the game and got to grips with the game.
Really?
Everton won 1-0. Lee Carsley scored. Rooney was on the bench. That's the time to give it some context. Young Rooney was on the bench.
Yeah.
And I would... As you get older, food is important. So we do get catered for. So getting there in time to eat your lunch is, if you miss a meal now, the energy levels do drop. Yeah. So I'm very into protein and stuff. I always do look and say, what's the fats and sugar content? Now I just look, is the protein in it?
Right.
And I've got to have the protein. So I've 4 or 5 hours before is never a problem for me.
So 4 or 5 hours before you'd get there. And what would your routine be prior to that? Would it be going over your notes? Would it be speaking to people?
Shouting to people, really. And also, I noticed this when COVID happened, that we couldn't go down the tunnel to talk to the players. It is that sort of interaction where you sometimes get a good story.
Which you might use in commentary ultimately.
Yes, but only with the players' permission. I always check that. The one I always tell is Robbie Savage, Blackburn beat Man United for a Sky game. I'm trying to think when it was. But it was a night game.
Yeah.
And I saw Robbie in the tunnel, and they were always very chatty. And he said, "I said, how are you doing?" He said, "I'm a bit tired. I've been moving house today." And I went, "Oh," I said, "Yeah." And you never guess. And I went, "Oh," he said, "I moved in next to Fergie."
No.
Instead of playing Man United.
Yeah.
Fergie released him, didn't he?
Yeah, of course, a perfect commentary line, effectively.
So I said, "Robbie, can I use that?" And he went, "Yeah, of course you can." Brilliant. So I got upstairs. I said, "I've changed the opening. Here we've got the amazing day for Robbie Savage. And guess what? Who's moved into cut to Fergie?" That was
brilliant.
And
so that's what you gain, that little bit of, it's only 5 seconds, but that for me is, as a viewer, a brilliant insight that you wouldn't get had you not been there early and speaking to Robbie, and you gain those relationships over time.
When I started, nobody knew anything. So you had a free hit with all the information. There were no stats. Nobody knew any players' birthdays.
No social media, nothing like that.
One player took me to task, a Liverpool player that I shouldn't really name, said, "You said it was my 32nd birthday last week." And I went, "Yes." And he said, "Well, you shouldn't have said that." I said, "Well, weren't you 32? And he went, of course I was, but I don't want people to know that.
Wow.
Yeah, and I understood that. I did understand
He
it.
said, weren't you 32? And he said, yes. So your information was correct.
Yeah, but he didn't want me to say it because at that time you were judged as a player. 32 was quite old.
Right,
This is 40 years ago.
Yes, understood.
Know? So I've always learned to check. I didn't check. You couldn't check birthdays with everybody and things like that. It's funny that sometimes I don't think they're so important. But Andreas Christensen scored on his birthday in the Champions League. He never scores. And in the knockout stage of the Champions League, he scored on his birthday, and nobody mentioned it.
Really?
Yeah, and I kept looking up. At the end, I looked it up again. I'm sure it must be. And I've never seen a report with it.
So you're watching that as a viewer and think that's an opportunity.
No, I was commentating.
You're commentating.
Yeah. And I can't. So what's important to me isn't always what's important to everyone else,
That's interesting. That I think it brings us nicely. Actually, we're going to talk about your journey with Sky and the commentary lines, but I'm interested there. You're talking about
when you say commentary lines, it's not a word that I really like. That does sound like it's a script.
Okay. Yeah. Some of your moments of commentary, I should say. Yeah. But I'm interested in some of the challenges you said there. I mean, logistically, the anxiety you must have when you're stuck on the motorway being one of them. Looking after your voice, is that something else that is concerning? Because we all can pick up coughs, colds, throat infections. How do you sort of look after your voice? And is that a constant stress for you?
You don't know the story, do you?
Not in depth. I know that you've spoken about having issues with your throat.
I had an issue coming after the World Cup. I came back and I want to talk about it because the NHS were fantastic.
Yeah, I think you've spoken briefly about this, but I don't know the ins and outs of it.
I did. They said, would I say something nice about the hospital, St. George's Hospital in Tooting, who treated me unbelievably well.
I know.
And it's not always had the best press. And I said, look, it'd be like a blank check. You tell me what you want me to say and I'll say it because I was looked after so well. So I've had two issues. Once back in the early 1990s, I'm not an actor. And I didn't know how to speak properly from within. I had to learn that. And I got a speech therapist. I met a speech therapist called Christina Schewel, who I'm still in touch with. This was 1993 or something like that. And she said, "You're not speaking properly. You're speaking on the in-breath, not the out-breath."
Wow.
And she just taught me to do it in one session. So that solved.
Can you just demonstrate what you mean by that? So
when you're struggling and you speak on the out-breath, you go 1, 2, 3. As you breathe out, there's no strain on your larynx at all.
Right.
4, 5, 6.
As opposed to if you were doing it on your in-breath.
You're doing it on your 1, 2, 3, 4, like that. So I was doing it like that, which a lot of people do because why would they change?
Yeah.
So she taught me that, Christina, and she's a magician at voice knowledge. Anyway, so then I came back from the World Cup where it was tough gig in terms of many matches, but whether it was the climate or whether it was, nobody seemed to be able to answer how it happened, but it did happen.
Yeah.
So about 6 weeks after I got back from the World Cup, I started to feel it was like just having hay fever, really. I described it. I passed it off. Even when I knew it wasn't hay fever, I passed it off as hay fever because people go, "Oh yeah, I struggle with my voice. I get hay fever." Anyway, the upshot was there was something on the vocal cord. I got great medical advice, initially privately, but then put in touch to a surgeon. He said, "You've got to have something removed, you know?"
Oh, okay.
And he said, "But only do it on the National Health." And I went, "It's all right with me." You know, we've all come from realizing what a wonderful National Health through the pandemic. So I had 2 operations, one in May and one in June of last year. And the first operation, within 10 days, I did the cup final.
Did you?
Yeah.
Was that quite stressful for you?
No, because I thought, oh, this is solved now.
Right.
I went back and he said, we've got to just finish off what we did. And then that was late June, and I didn't commentate till the end of October. So I was facing not commentating.
And how difficult was that for yourself? Because obviously you commentated all your life.
I think for anybody who was to lose their voice, with possibility being permanently.
Was that? Sorry, I didn't realize there was a possibility that you could have lost your voice permanently.
One, there was a possibility it would be cancer. The second possibility would be whatever happens we won't be able to get it working again. And you might have to go for, if it's cancer, chemotherapy or radiotherapy and everything. And yeah, you lose your identity, especially for somebody like me, you know? I mean, I'm quite a sociable bloke, and
you are,
I couldn't go down and order a coffee. I couldn't answer the phone, only to people that really knew the problem. And of course, I'd come to the end of my time with Sky, which that's absolutely no problem. Wonderful respect for all the time they gave me and everything. So that was not a problem. In fact, it helped in some ways, Adam, because I couldn't have commentated in August of 2023.
Yeah,
I wasn't fit. So it gradually, it didn't get better as quick the second time, but it wasn't cancer.
Right. Okay. So
it was just something that needed to heal.
Yeah.
But being of the elderly generation, you don't heal quite as quickly as you do when you're your age. So it took a bit of time. I had two things happened to me. One, my partner, Debbie, she amazingly put up with, she had to deal with my lowest points, you know. She's South African. She went to work one day and said, I'm not having this. I'm finding out what's the problem with you. And she rang up and said, I've looked it up. It'll take 6 months. It might take 6 months. So get on with it.
Really?
That's what she said. And I did. And the other thing I went to the GP, said, is there any way I'm not healing because of something else? So they prescribed, you know what they prescribed me? Eggs and bacon for 2 weeks for breakfast.
Wow.
Protein.
Is that right?
Yeah.
To help? Right.
Protein. And whether it was the natural healing curve or the protein helped, I'm sure it did. By mid-October, I went and did a test at Gravity Media, have been a fantastic company to work for me. They allowed me to do a game that we already played, a whole commentary on my own, the full Monty with the lip mic and the crowd noise and everything. It was a Man United 3, Galatasaray 3. It was lots of shouts in.
I remember it.
And
great game.
I got through that, although I said at halftime, I'm fine. They went, no, I'm under orders. Only me and the sound man. And I'm under orders to make you do the whole game because we don't know whether you'll be subbed after 75 minutes. You can do that with a player, but you can't do it. I was subbed a few times after 75 minutes as a player. So we did it. And then they and the Premier League productions, I've done 40 since that.
Amazing.
My first game. I've done 40 odd games and I can shout. So
amazing.
No problem about it.
I didn't realise, I know that we'd spoken previously about it. I didn't realise the detail of that and actually what you went through. So firstly, I'm glad that you're better. I'm
happy to talk about it because of the wonderful care and attention I got.
Well said.
And something came out. It was in a news item really, and they rang me up. The BBC rang me up to put it out on there after the press release had gone out. And I just shouted for Cole Palmer 4 goals at Monday night, Chelsea against Everton. And I was about to do a Champions League game the next day. And, you know, on the phone, sometimes it strains you. Don't worry about it. She said, I won't keep you on the phone too long. I said, I'm fine. I'm going to get through this conversation. Brilliant. And I want to say thank you to them. And I say that to you using your industry. It's part of our industry, looking out. And I've spoken to other commentators since just to say, don't take it for granted.
Yeah, great advice.
Yeah, that's all I would say.
Yeah, brilliant. I can see you getting emotional talking about that. Yeah. So I didn't even know it was going to go down that direction. And obviously it's great that you're healthy and back now, Martin. So brilliant words, I think. On the subject of challenges, I wanted to ask you about pronunciation's another thing, because I hear so many names that are said differently by commentators. I read an interesting article that you wrote about Bruno Fernandes's name. Can you share this?
That was on my podcast.
It was on your podcast. Brilliant. I was listening to your podcast then. Yeah. Can you talk to us about how sometimes mispronunciation is the way to go and just how that goes?
Every commentator is different.
Yeah.
Some people are. I did French at school, so I can say Lucadinha, which is how it should be said. And if you've had that kind of background, it's not so difficult, but then you get Polish names, which are difficult, and the Scandinavian names.
Yeah.
Erling Haaland is Haaland.
Yes.
And he has told us, and so I'm quite happy to go along with it. He was what he wants. If you're Norwegian, you call him Haaland.
Yeah.
If you're anything but Norwegian, you call him Haaland.
Right, okay.
He made that quite clear in various press conferences. I remember a German reporter saying, so it's Haaland then? And he went back and he said, well, you're not Norwegian, are you? So
yeah. So you would, just to clarify, you would call him Erling Haaland in commentary?
I called him Haaland. I called his dad Haaland.
Right.
Alfie.
Alfie Holland, yeah.
Yeah, in fact, I made a point the other day that he scored 2 goals, a famous win for Stuart Pearce, caretaker manager, against Arsenal, Forest against Arsenal. Stuart got the job. Basically, he tells the story that he picked the team and he didn't pick a goalkeeper. He never picked a team in his life. You know? And anyway, Alfie scored, and it's on YouTube and with my voice on it. And I call him, and he's done it again, Alfie Holland. So now, with all my Erling stuff for Man City, it's sort of, I don't know, it rankles a bit that I've got to change the names, but we're all entitled to change our names, aren't we? I mean, some people actually change their whole names. So some players have done that in the past as well. So, the Portuguese one was the one you're referring to.
Yeah, Bruno Fernandes.
It's Bruno Fernandes. And most Portuguese names are, the S's are Sh, Gomes, and things like that. But I think there has to come a point where somebody draws a line. But it was reported that I deliberately mispronounced Bruno's name.
Yeah, tell us about that, because we're right.
I do deliberately mispronounce it because I don't. He's gone too far into before we found this out.
Yeah,
he'd gone too far,
and people knew him as Bruno Fernandes.
All the commentators know this.
Yeah.
So I was listening to Guy Mowbray did his game the other day, and I'm sort of reassured that nobody's gone. The only person who does it, Derek Ray on the FIFA computer game, and Derek is a linguist.
Okay.
He speaks.
So he would say Bruno Fernandes.
Yes. Yeah. And people have been saying, why are you saying that? But he's right. But there are certain times, like the Y's it's Ian Mulbu, but I got Glenn Hussein with a Y in it to say his name on television, so we got that across the line.
Right.
Mulbu couldn't. In those days, there wasn't that much television, so so you just have to. Solskjaer, there are difficult names that come across. I try to say it as they would say it, but I've just told you that that's not 100%.
Yeah, that's really interesting, that. And I think what's interesting as well is I heard you say that, and I've seen this, before a season, the Premier League do a brilliant bit of content where they get every player to say how their name
and he says Bruno Fernandes.
It's spelled. So they stand by the camera and we have all the players for every squad. Yeah. And Bruno Fernandes, you said, actually says Bruno Fernandes. Yeah. But obviously your point is it's gone too far past that
if we all
to change his name.
If we all got together as commentators and said next season we're going to call him Bruno Fernandes, I think the public would come with us, but nobody would call him that in the pub, would they? The simple way out of this is just to call him Bruno.
Yeah, really good.
And I've got the cup final to come, so he's probably going to do something sensational in that, So, but now maybe we can say, look, if you're Portuguese and listening to this, well played, Bruno Fernandes. Maybe we can. There's always a way around it, especially when it's live. So.
It's fascinating that I call him Bruno when he scores the winner. We spoke about Sky in your time, obviously. You were the voice of football for Sky for many years. When you joined Sky in the early 90s, or it was prior to Sky Sports, wasn't it? It was the merger of British Sky Broadcasting and Sky Sports. Could you envisage then that the start of Sky Sports and the Premier League would be this seismic in football and how it's changed the landscape? Because it is incredible looking back on that journey, isn't it, really?
Long question, short answer, no.
No, okay.
Not at all.
No.
I've said this many times, we used to go up go to commentating games on the train, and you'd go through places where you'd look at how many dishes there are, no dishes there. What are we doing wrong? And you actually report back to people and say, why aren't we selling, I don't know, Coventry or something like that? Why aren't we selling dishes there? So, that it was a real pioneering exercise, and it's changed the game. It's changed the game for, use your word, industry. It's changed the industry enormously. But it hasn't changed my job. My job's exactly the same.
Really?
Shout goal,
Really? That's amazing how you look at that.
Only when it's in. Now with the goal line technology, you're pretty safe on that one.
Yeah, and obviously the voice of the Premier League at Sky for 33 years, which is incredible. I know you talk about your time at Sky very fondly. Likewise, I'm at Sky and I've got only great things to say about the company. I want to talk about some of these moments. I wrote down prior to this, it's 11, it's heaven for Jamie Vardy. It defied description, it defies logic for the Rooney goal, the Adams moment. Do you have highlights of your time there? Or is it impossible to pick a single moment?
It's for other people to say.
Really?
Yeah. No, if you were doing it for that, you'd spend, instead of concentrating on the game, you'd be saying, I've got, where's my signature moment today going to happen? And I think the blessing that I've had is to be at the football ground holding a microphone when those things have happened.
Do you get goosebumps or hair standing on edge when those moments happen?
You watch it just like anybody else. It happens to be you, but you don't watch it like that. It's just a voice on the telly. And if it sort of resonates, but it's not just my voice. There's lots of very talented commentators who are producing those moments that really relate to why we love the game.
Yeah.
Goals are what... the first game I went to see, Woking won 4-1, and the goals, what I remember, and I used to go up to West Byfleet Recreation Ground with a football, and when they put the nets up, which they did before the game, so before you got chased off, I just wanted to smash the ball in the net.
Did you? Yeah.
It wasn't much of a smash when you were 7 or 8 years old, but that's always been what it's been about for me. At school playground, I was always the one who wanted to play, but I only wanted to play to score. They say it's the hardest thing to do. It's not now. They're keeping the clean sheets the hardest thing to do.
Yeah. And we expect to play out from the back as well, the way the modern game's going.
Well, that was something. It was bad enough. We had some good midfield players in my team when I was playing seriously. But if they wanted to play 3 or 4 passes, get it wide,
really?
Get it in. Yeah, get it in as quickly as possible. I feel sorry for Erling Haaland. Imagine me feeling sorry for him.
It's got a tough gig.
But why don't you give him the ball when he wants it? That's one very, 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 very low key centre forward looking at one of the greatest centre forwards the game's ever produced.
Scores a lot of goals. You say you can't pick a moment, but we have to talk about this moment, Martin. That Agüero moment. I want to find out everything about that day and things we might not know or anything that hasn't been told, because for me, that is the most iconic piece of Martin Tyler commentary. Well, would you agree with that? You must agree that that's probably your most iconic moment, would you?
It is, as I say, it's for other people to judge, and other people keep asking me about it.
Yeah.
I'm not the first.
Sorry about that.
But as I've said many times, Sergio's moment, Manchester City's moment, obviously not the Manchester City of today. They were heading there, and that moment perhaps propelled them quicker towards where we find them now. But being chosen to do it, I could have been sent to the other game. It's just the luck of being there and watching it happen and unfold. And I guess we've brilliant direction from Tony Mills, absolutely magnificent direction. Constantly going up, seeing these shots of Manchester United.
You're talking about the match director on the day, for people that don't know.
Tony Mills is the match director. Yeah. So we had that split screen at the end.
Yeah.
Which, if you post-produced the coverage of the game, you would not do it as well as he did it. He just got that moment, and he comes back and
the coverage was amazing, wasn't
it forward, and Sergio does the rest. I told Sergio, we've only had that one real conversation. I've seen him a couple of times since, but I knew you'd score before you knew. But maybe that's slightly manufacturing it, because that's
what you said.
The moment
Sergio,
it went to Agüero, I knew it would be a goal. And so sometimes, I suppose, that extra millisecond, you recognise the consequences of it. But I didn't know what I was going to say.
Did you not? So you didn't know at all what you were going to say, and that even though the millisecond before, it's not a lot of time to think, obviously, but you twigged he might score and what that meant. You hadn't scripted or planned anything for that.
Can you? No. Has anybody thought that was going to happen on the day? That's why this scripting thing, all commentators drives them mad, because we have to react to what happens. And no, I had no idea.
Is there any secret behind that, do you think, in terms of, obviously that's been quite rightly so incredibly well perceived. I imagine you told me off camera that people, even young kids, stop you in the street and ask you to do the Aguero moment. Is that right?
I can't do it, and I won't do it, because there's a level there. I will say, if people ask me for a selfie, I'll go, and it's live. I'll do that.
But you'd never recreate the Aguero.
No, I can't recreate.
Why not? Because you can't do it.
It's a level that you have to have the moment.
Right, understood. Yeah,
I think so. Not more the decibel level, I think. You know? Mark Hughes, I saw, it was manager of QPR that day.
Yeah, of course.
Obviously a former City manager as well. He said to me it was the noisiest moment he'd ever heard in a football ground.
Really?
I saw him the next night at the LMA dinner, the league managers dinner. And just by chance, we bumped into each other. He said it was annoying. He played for Bayern, Barcelona, and the manager and all. So after that, probably the best bit of my commentary is a 9-second silence after Agüero.
Do you know, I was going to ask you about that actually. Is that a big key part of it? Because in the goal, I watched it back I've seen it many times, but you have the Agüero and the oh, which is amazing. But then there's a long pause before I swear you'll never see anything like this again. So watch it, drink it in, which is just a genius line. But is that pause really important for the viewer to take that moment in, or is that you thinking of the line? How does that work? Give us some sort of insight.
The noise, maybe. I don't know. I've always been. I've never done radio. Right. I told you earlier. I went into television. I learned from Bob Gardner and other very good directors about the power of the vision.
Right.
And I've always felt the words support the vision. I was once doing an England game actually for ITV in the States before the '86 World Cup. And there was a rather non-football crew really doing it. And I heard a guy say, you can either have the pictures or the sound.
Really?
And I put the microphone down because there was only one choice. I wasn't going to be speaking, was I?
Yeah.
They did sort the problem out, but it's vision.
Yeah, so had that been on the radio, obviously you couldn't pause for 9 seconds. It would have been a completely different experience.
Yeah. I mean, I've tried. I never thought of a career in radio, although back in the early days, before I became even a journalist, I did have a test at BBC Radio, what would be now 5 Live, I guess, yeah. Didn't get anywhere with it, so, and basically my way of commentating is to have pauses, really. Yeah. So I'd be useless on radio, and I'm probably the only one.
Do you think you would?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. I've tried it with Clive Tilsley, who I was working in radio. He was doing local radio for Radio City in Liverpool. And there were some nights where there were 2 games and he didn't have anybody in the south. So I was asked, I remember Gillian played Everton a few times. I went there and did a couple of those games. Oxford United, I did a game. I remember the producer saying, keep talking. Oh yeah, I better do that.
Yeah.
So I would be absolutely useless. I'm probably the only commentator that you could name who's never done radio.
Wow.
And maybe there's some difference. I don't know.
Yeah. That's really interesting when you say it like that, because I hadn't thought of that. Was there a secret to that day, or anything we might not know about, or that made that Agüero moment so special for you? And anything you can tell us about that day and your memories of that?
No, the memory in the morning was that City could mess this up, because typical City is a cliche that they use about themselves, or they did. Typical City now is to hold up the trophy.
Can't stop winning.
But it was to build you up and then let you down. So I remember doing across the Sky Sports News saying that could happen. Yeah,
because they were expected to win.
Yeah. I mean, people forget
against
that, really,
QPR,
and people forget Joey Barton had been sent off.
Yeah, very true.
And that QPR were virtually safe. They weren't 100% sure. Some of the players near Mark Hughes, I think, somebody just shouted that the result in the other game had gone their way.
Right.
So there was that sort of a Will City, will they bottle it on the big day, But they nearly did. And the other story that I'll share with you and shared a few times before was, after the game, after we'd done the presentation and everything, I went to see a guy called Paul Doherty, who'd been my boss when I worked for ITV for Granada, whose dad had won the league with Manchester City in 1937, I think it was. And he told me he was going to bring his medal, because there might be medal. Everybody expected City to win, didn't they?
Yeah.
So I said, I must go and find Paul. And so I went down and so the game was done. I saw I went down. Richard Scudamore, who was chief executive of the Premier League, was coming up, so thrilled because he hadn't done the rights deals for the new season. Right, he just got the perfect plot delivered safe, but you've got to pay more for this next year. He was buzzing. And I saw Paul, and we had a couple of probably had a glass of water with him, and then we were all meeting in a restaurant afterwards in Altrincham. And I was one of the last ones to arrive, and I honestly hadn't thought about the commentary. I'd thought a lot about the game. Yeah, honestly, I'm probably a bit relieved that I hadn't made a mess of it. And and they were playing. They weren't just watching the goal; they were playing with the commentary when I went into the restaurant.
Yeah.
So I sort of thought, well, doesn't sound too bad.
That's your first emotion.
That was it,
You didn't muck it up, and it didn't sound too bad. Not I've just produced one of the best commentary lines in Premier League history.
No, I've never thought that. I mean, I know people tell me that.
People must tell you that now, though.
They do, and I suppose because of people talk about the commentary lines, but it's the events that they're describing. Ken Wolstenholme with England winning the World Cup, and they think it's all over.
It is
Some people on the pitch, which they were. He was describing what was happening.
Incredible.
But the way he did it was beautifully done. Brian Moore, it's up for grabs now at Anfield, and if I've been doing it 1974 to 2012, so what's that, 38 years.
Wow.
So I was probably due to get one of those games, and it had happened. And that's the way I look upon it now. And each time the last day of the season comes around, I wonder whether somebody else is going to be so lucky, because obviously Brian's was the last day of the season. Maybe the World Cup. I mean, if England were to win a World Cup, I've done all the World Cups since '78 for various broadcasters, and we got close. And of course, I did the final for UEFA for the Euros, and we got even closer. Luke Shaw scored in the first minute, and he's. When he's 9, he's playing against the school team that I'm coaching.
Wow.
And there he is at Wembley giving us, it seemed, one hand on the trophy.
Moment.
And such a small world that it is in. Yeah. He was far too good at 9 for my team.
I bet he was, yeah.
Actually, there's a story that I put a boy, we say man-to-man marking, it was boy-to-boy marking, because he was so well. I only know this for sure because the boy I put on him tells the story, and he's still playing. He's playing for Enfield Town, who've just got promoted into the National League South from the Isthmian League, and he's called James Richmond, and he marked, and so it was probably a terrible thing for a coach to do. I did pick someone who was going to be a footballer to mark an England international of the future as well, so it wasn't too bad. Yeah, and it's been close, and somebody will get the Ken Wolstenholme moment, and I wish them well, whoever it is. It won't be me.
That's amazing when you say it like that. We touched on it earlier. What has the reaction to that Agüero moment been for you? I mean, you said people ask you in the streets to do it for selfies. How often are we talking about that people come up to you and reference that or talk about it in the street? And is it an older generation? Is it younger kids? Just to give us an insight into what that reaction has done to you personally.
It's my new name, really.
Is it?
The Agüero man. He's the Agüero man. That's what people say. Yeah. And I was, as we talked about earlier, I was so lucky to be able finally to discuss it with Sergio on a few days before he left Manchester City.
Can you tell us about that? What was actually said between you two?
It was very hastily arranged because of COVID.
Yeah.
And we knew he was going, and they said, we've got to try and arrange it. And if I hadn't passed the COVID test, it wouldn't have even happened then.
Yeah.
But he was wonderfully gracious, really.
Because he'd heard the commentary, presumably.
Oh, yeah. He says his dad listens to it all the time.
Really?
I don't know whether how true that is. I like to think it's true. It was sort of went full circle, really, to do it. And it was a very humbling moment, to be honest with you.
I bet it was. I think it's almost a perfect note to end it with. We end the podcast always by asking this to all our guests. I just wondered what advice you would have to people, be that young commentators or people that would listen to this and take inspiration from you. What advice you'd have for them?
Go for it. There's far more opportunities now than there've ever been, but only go for it if you truly love football.
And that's great advice. Martin, can I just say as well, personally, I don't know if our viewers or listeners know this, but you live a long way from here. You've given up your time. You've travelled here. You even arrived at the studio before I did, which was incredible. And also,
part of the commentary getting there early.
It is incredible, and I wasn't late either. But I just want to say as well, I don't know if you recall this, but you've done so much for me in my career. I remember when I was starting out in presenting prior to hosting shows and interviews, and we were doing Facebook Lives or little things pitch side, and myself and other presenters would come there, and I was always taken aback by how much time you'd have for little old me, and how much time you put into what we were doing. And I remember you saying one thing that's always stuck in my mind, that you treated everything as if it was the most important thing, because for someone watching that Facebook Live or that Sports News Cross or that commentary, everything's of equal importance. And I just truly mean this, is you're someone that I've looked up to for so long, and the fact that you've given up your time to come on this podcast means a lot. And thank you so much for your time.
All I would say, Adam, and thank you for those kind words, is that I believe I'm the luckiest person alive to be able to do all these things, have done all these things with you and many other people, and everything involved in it. It still feels special. It still feels special today, and I've really enjoyed this. Thank you.
Thank you for your time.